Hello, ghouls and gals, and welcome to another episode of Myth, Magic, and Movies, the podcast where we look at movies and TV shows through a horror, fantasy, and mythological lens. And today we are going to ask the question, what is a ghost? What are they? Where do they come from? And what do they do in our lives? But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe. I mean, we did get the triple-digit number for subscribers, so I'd like to see that continue. So if you can, please help us out. We definitely appreciate that. And I'll get the movie Pope to make a speech afterwards. So yes, I do have that power. So today we've assembled a great panel to have this important discussion to talk about how we understand ghosts in the afterlife and how they're depicted in the media and where they're going. With me is production designer for the Matthews Playhouse, Cassie Prodan. She is the organizer of the Haunted Trail in Matthews every October, and based out of California, where they're California dreaming, but he's dreaming of something scary. Matthew Johnson, how are you, sir?
Doing all right.
And one of my favorite collaborators, well, I shouldn't say that because they're all my favorite collaborators, but one of my best collaborators, the founder and director of Mortem Players based out of Concord, North Carolina, and recently installed as film bishop by his moviness, Chris Stonnell. How are you, Chris?
I couldn't be better. It's October, so I'm living the dream.
You're in your element, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
We're all in our element, and I gotta say, this is like the perfect time to actually have this discussion because ghosts pretty much are part of the theme of not only October, but Halloween and All Hallows Tide. And if you come from a religious background, you can't help but know that ghosts are everywhere. And and especially in some Christian denominations, it would make sense for you to pray for them because some of them define ghosts as lost spirits who are just trying to find their way into the afterlife. But I want to go ahead and dive right in here. So when we think about ghosts, we traditionally think of a disembodied spirit or something that's draped in a white shroud with two eye holes and just floating around, appearing in graveyards or abandoned homes or cemeteries or what have you. But I think it's safe to say that if we were to ask people what is a ghost, we'd probably get a different answer. So I just want to go ahead and start off with getting each of your understanding and definition of what a ghost is. So if someone were to walk up to you, and assuming the conversation wasn't awkward, and they said, "Hey, what is a ghost? What are they, and how do you perceive them?" What would you say? Matt, we'll start with you.
Well, for me, I take the quantum mechanics version of a ghost there. They're just kind of like something that's like a videotape stuck on rewind since we have limited perceptions about our own reality. So we sense things through our five senses there. And so the ghosts are basically like images that are of a past life and a future life that are all occurring at the same instance there because, as people, we try to contain everything by creating this aspect of time and how time travels and works. But in reality, I think that time is more elastic. It can, opens and closes, and what we're just viewing are just captured moments.
So would you say that time is irrelevant, when it comes to your understanding of what a ghost is?
Yes.
Okay. What about interaction? Would you say that you're able to interact with something that's intelligent, or is it more of you're just seeing something from the past, being replayed over and over again?
I think it's more about something that is being replayed over and over because like even when we go like on a different ghost tours and all, they talk about their stories and about how these like something like from the Civil War, like over at Gettysburg, and they were telling these stories. I'm like, it all fits into this idea of a tape that's stuck on, playing over, and it hits rewind and plays again, hits rewind.
Gotcha. So sort of like the stone tape theory that people often talk about, right?
Yes.
Gotcha. Cassie, how would you define a ghost to the uninitiated?
So similar to Matthew, I kind of look at ghosts as more of like an imprint or a memory. I kind of take stock into the energy cannot be destroyed theory. It can only be rediverted or reworked. And I think oftentimes when you have locations that a person lived in, worked in, died in, something very traumatic or shocking happened in that area, I think that energy can carry over a lot, especially if you've ever walked into, a particular historical building or something like that, and you get that feeling of like, I don't like, there's just something off. So whether that, you can chalk that up to, if you want to go more the spiritual or religious route, where it's a human imprint of a soul rather than like the energy of an event. But yeah, similar to, instead of a tape, I kind of go with more that memory imprint analogy.
But you would sort of follow Matt's line of thinking, where where it's just something that is on repeat. It's not necessarily something that if you ask it a question, it's gonna give you an answer in real time. Oh, like for instance, will the Packers win the Super Bowl? And the ghost says, yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah, I think it would be more, like if you were asking a ghost a question, I think it would have to be more pertinent to their life, something that if we're that experience in that time, rather than something that carries over into, there was a ghost in the 1800s, who should I, bet on in the Kentucky Derby, they may not comprehend. So So like if we went to Gettysburg, for instance, it would be kind of foolish to ask like a dead Confederate soldier, hey, who do you think is going to win the election this November, right? It'll be more of like, well, do you know where General Longstreet is? Yeah.
Okay. All right, Chris, how would you define a ghost to someone who has no idea of what a ghost is? They're completely ignorant.
Well, probably shocking to everyone, but I would come at it from the dramatic literary ghost, because I've done so many, love reading the Victorian ghost stories. And for me, what draws me to them, makes me excited about them, is the story part of the ghost story. So I've never like been a huge fan of any of the like ghost hunting TV shows. That it's always been about the history and the story. So for me, it is that sort of disembodied spirit that's stuck here on this plane between the two worlds, for some unfinished business or revenge, or because of the horrific nature of their passing. Whatever is the best story and the most dramatic romantic version of the ghost is, that's where I like to live.
So you lean more towards like the Canterville ghost or Hamlet's father at the beginning of Hamlet, something like that. Someone who is interacting with you and saying, "Hey, can you help me kind of do this so I can make my peace and move on to the next life?"
Yeah, or even the ghost that needs to avenge their own passing, or before they can move on. They can kind of be a good spirit or an evil spirit. They can kind of go either way.
Yeah, and I know you said you don't like ghost hunting shows, but I was gonna say I was watching Ghost Adventures a few weeks ago, and they were doing a seance in this house in California where they were getting the imprint of a husband and wife who were murdered in a home invasion, and their souls couldn't rest until they were able to find a way to bring the murders to justice, as it were. As far as I know, that that they still haven't caught the killers, but but it kind of, in a weird way, it kind of illustrates your point to that in your understanding, these ghosts aren't just kind of stuck in a mindless loop. They're intelligent. They know what's going on. And they know what needs to be done to kind of move ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you can get on. You can get down in the weeds and all the different types of ghosts, because obviously you could start classifying them, where some maybe are a little more attached to an event more so than, but it's kind of splitting hairs.
Yeah. So I mean, this is really interesting because we're getting like three different understandings of how we understand ghosts. Matthew, I think you've got the most scientific approach of them all, and Chris, you've got the most dramatic understanding out of all. But that makes sense because the most common thread is that these are echoes of people who were once flesh and blood. People who, like you and me, who lived lives, and either by tragedy or circumstance or through nature, they ended up, where they are. So this does lead me to to my next question, because like I said before, Halloween's coming up. Whenever we think of Halloween, one of the first things we think of are ghosts. But why are we so fascinated with them? Because, I mean, because whether you look at something as friendly as Casper or something as terrifying as what you see in 13 Ghosts, it kind of evokes this sort of primordial fear in all of us. So why are we so interested in something that we can't see anymore? Anybody can start off.
I'll jump in. I think some of it's because it's the one question that none of us know the answer to, and that's what happens after we die. And with the ghost stories, I mean, once again, that's sort of that is that is in some way a proof of the afterlife. It takes place in the afterlife, so there's that. So I think that's always a draw to it, that there is something after this, and so I think that's one of those, I think, draws to the ghost story.
Yeah, I would agree that I think it's ghosts would be proof that there is life after death, and if they're still around here, why is that? For what reason? Oh God, is that going to happen to me? Am I going to be stuck in this plane? The fear of the unknown and being faced with the memories of this person, having to be, relive parts of your life, or being stuck in one place. It's especially when if there is another place and you can't get to it, that's terrifying.
Yeah, it definitely goes back to the whole, like, the lizard brain of man thinking back, okay, so I have to make up a story about what something is and how something's going to happen, so that way I can feel confident and comfortable in the way I'm living. And that's where you get this idea of, like, the religion comes from, all that, the creating of these mythos there, and the ghosts are just another version of the mythos about what we call the postlude.
Do you think? Do you think that when we see a ghost or when we encounter a ghost, do we feel like there is a sense of closure on our part because we finally have an answer to what happens after death, or do you think that just raises more questions?
For me, I think it doesn't really have closure, because if we go with the whole the spiritual aspect, like the after image, like, why is that image still there? It brings up more questions. Like, why is it still here? Why are we perceiving it there at this moment? And why is it not any other time? What has triggered this event? That's what it comes to me.
I would say that, there's probably the piece of knowing that there's something else, but I feel like then there's all those questions about the something else, So I think it's a little of both. I mean, you may have the peace of mind knowing that there's still conscious existence going forward, but there's a whole slew of new questions then.
Mm-hmm. Especially if we're talking about eternity, like, yeah.
Yeah, and that, Cassie, to your point, I mean, what we kind of forget is that, in a sense that, yes, we do go on living after our bodies have, long since turned to worm food, but there's but we still crave change. We want to know that we're moving forward to something. So the idea of just being stuck somewhere, like, say, for instance, if you're stuck in a house for all of eternity, that in itself can be a terrifying prospect, because now you're just wondering, well, when will I ever get out of here? Really? But would you guys say that the idea of the ghost itself is terrifying, or is it just the circumstances, behind them that's terrifying?
I think also it's sort of that memento mori, aspect of a ghost, that seeing a ghost reminds you that you're immortal and that you will die at some point. So I think that's part of the fear, is you're facing death, or being faced with death. And I think with the ghost, with also there's that fear of, especially the revenge ghosts of, maybe something you've done in life, the knowledge that doesn't end with the person you did it to's death now, because there could be supernatural comeuppance at some point.
I always find it fascinating, like especially how they try to portray it in films. You have like in Beetlejuice, where when they die, they're just captured there and they're stuck there in that moment there, and then they have to see all the people going through and shuffling through their things and reshaping what they saw was their world. And then, like, you know, how would you feel being in there and not able to really communicate like, your like distrust or like saying, "Oh, I don't like that couch you just put in there. What are you doing to my house?"
Mm-hmm.
So,
Or like, I don't know if you've seen the movie A Ghost Story. I think it's an A24 film. But you know, even then, it's like, well, eventually that house isn't going to be there anymore, or the people that you knew in life are gone, but you're still remaining there. So you know, it's like years later, you're standing in a field or standing in the middle of some city that's grown up where you are, but you're always stuck in this one location. So I think that's, you know, a little bit terrifying.
Yeah, it's always when you see these haunted houses or, you know, alleged haunted houses and they get torn down, they, you know, are decrepit over the years. It's like, yeah, what happens to that energy? Does it eventually move on? Is it just floating around in the ether? Yeah, it's an interesting question.
when I was in Gettysburg, part of the tour guide, they would talk about like even in the modern places like the post office, they would still see the soldier just like walking. People would call up and report there's somebody in the post office, and then they would say, "Well, there's nobody there." Because it's been said over and over again. It's basically an image of a soldier who was shot in the head, and because typically when you're shot in the head, you think that people die instantly, but in this case, no, they didn't die instantly. They basically were walking back and forth their body until they finally collapsed and died. And so that's what they kept seeing over and over and reporting that same instance in the modern post office now.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of a post office, I mean, even like in Chicago, like, you know, the H.H. Holmes story, the Murder Castle, you know, where the Murder Castle is, it's a post office now. So, you know, so probably one of these where definitely horrible energy and tragedy took place is literally a post office now.
What does that say about our society?
We don't value post office that much. But Matt, you perfectly brought the point about ghosts portrayed in the media by using Beetlejuice because in the past our ancestors, before technology became prevalent, they used to sit around by the fire and tell these ghost stories, and then as we developed as a society, we were able to put them down in books thanks to the printing press, and then eventually we began to stage them in plays and musicals and operas, and then we committed them to film. And I would say that out of all of the media out there, film is probably, I would say, it's probably the most conducive to ghost stories, because you're taking a moment, to your point again, something that was a story that was told like maybe 100 years ago or even 50 years ago, and now we're watching it in 2024. And I mean, let's take for instance, the House on Haunted Hill, movie that was made way back in the day, and you watch that movie, and most of these actors are have long gone, but we're witnessing the action as if we were there. So that does lead me to my next point. I mean, how do you think the ghost has been portrayed? Well, I'll expand even further. The ghost and the supernatural have been portrayed in the media. Do you think that they've been, I guess, quote unquote, appropriately, depicted, or do you think that do you think they sort of tone things down, or they kind of exaggerate things to kind of heighten or kind of lower the effects of what they are to, I guess, our modern sensibilities?
I guess you got to take a look at the various lenses in which they portray it through, like, the long-standing series Supernatural, where there are beings to be destroyed, to be getting rid of in order to preserve life. So it's like they had to kill death to preserve life. So I think that's very poignant. Quite often I find they embellish a lot upon the ghost and supernatural, and they take it out of the whole idea of like, okay, these were once loved ones, now to like, oh, here's something that's going to get you and end you and make you like that.
Yeah, I think the films a lot play into the vengeful ghost, the angry ghost, that regardless of whether you personally had any stake in their death, just by being within their vicinity or within their territory, you are now a threat to their space, their routine. When I think there would, I think there's probably a lot more mundane ghosts that are out there that are just, little old Granny Whitaker who's, sitting out in the rocking chair on the front porch and, you hear it creaking and, it's probably that, is she going to come after you with a butcher knife in the middle of the night because you moved into her farmhouse? Probably not. So yeah, I think media definitely, of course for the, for the shock and awe of it, but I think there's a lot of heavy representation of the angry, vengeful spirit.
They even made it into like a disease, like in like It Follows, where the spirit is transmitted from one person to the next. So it's like, I don't know. It's like, is it really supposed to be like that deadly? Is it really, I mean, I understand the fear, because disease and death, and it's just transmitted that way. It's like, I don't know. It feels like more of an extreme embellishment.
Yeah, it's hard to quantify because they've been treated so many different ways. I mean, if you look at the ghosts in Ghostbusters, I mean, they're like Slimer, the screen blob. I mean, it's not someone's grandmother.
Yeah.
And then you've got movies like The Sixth Sense, or you've got movies like The Others, where you don't even realize who the ghosts are necessarily until further in the movie. Spoiler alerts. Or then, speaking of mundane ghosts, it's why I really love, the TV series Ghosts, more so the original UK version, because that's what it is. It's just there are these just average people who died in this house who are still there, and it's that fun joke when the people move in and she can see them, it assumes they're going to be terrifying, and then they're just average people who are just there. Waiting till their turn till they've done whatever they need to do to move on. So, I mean, I think it's hard to kind of give one answer across the board on how they're portrayed. I mean, obviously, if you're most of our like horror films, ones there with the intention of scaring, then it's going to be some kind of malevolent ghost. But even it's interesting in a film like The Changeling with George C. Scott, which is one of my favorite ghost stories. I mean, it's this house where there's obviously horrible things and scary things happening, but then you kind of find out that it's the ghost of this child who was murdered, who was trying to get justice and trying to get the attention of the people living there, who were terrified at first and realized, we need to just pay attention to what's being told to us here.
You can definitely romanticize the idea, especially with you get those gothic films where they romanticize death and the afterlife and like, meeting up with your true love afterwards, or even kind of like the concept of, the What Dreams May Come film. So like the aftermath of it is what you make it of it. So that fits along with what we're talking about.
Yeah, and what I find fascinating is the fact that there really is no one accurate way to portray a ghost, because to Chris's point, I mean, I'm sure for the most part, when we think of ghosts, we have the sort of preconceived notion that ghosts are supposed to be terrifying, but it turns out these are just ordinary people. I mean, they may not have a body like we do, but they're still normal, average people. It's sort of like saying, well, I'm sure everybody in, and I'm going to pick on you for a bit, Matt. I'm sure everybody in California is a terrible driver, but then when you actually get into a car with a California driver, they're just as normal as everybody. They follow the speed limit. They don't run red lights, and they don't just drive Ferraris and just crash everywhere. So while we're on the subject, I do have to ask. So when it comes to the portrayal of ghosts, whether it's in film or TV or reality shows, is there a particular one that stands out to you that just makes you think, huh, that the way they do it makes complete sense? Like, that's reasonable. I can definitely roll with that.
I mean,
Uh,
I'll say again, that's hard to answer because it kind of depends on what like, to me, if I'm looking just technically and like what wowed me the most, I love the way they created the ghosts in the Del Toro movie Crimson Peak. That, like, because it was mainly practical effects, and just the way Doug Jones like contorts his body in these different ghosts. They were, I really like that. I mean, do I necessarily want to hope that's what ghosts look like if I become a ghost? Probably not. But as far as from a technical aspect, that wowed me. That I was like, wow, that's really awesome. That that's probably the one I can think of.
My favorite. My opinion of it has changed. When I first saw it, it terrified me. But the remake of the 13 Ghosts, just because with my concept of ghosts being sort of this imprint and energy, and the idea that it wasn't necessarily, it was the archetype that these ghosts fit into that powered the machine, and they just happened to sort of fit that profile. And just I love the way that they captured it, of that, they are invisible. You can't see them unless you look through these glasses and, the incantations on the mirror to keep them locked behind. I just thought it was a kind of a fascinating way, especially of how we try to control ghosts as well, and utilize them for our own purposes and powering our machines. And, can we control this cosmic force? Yeah, I just love it.
Not technically, like I said, not a ghost story per se, but What Dreams May Come, I think epitomizes the ideology of like the afterlife and everything is what we make of it. And just like with our own existence here, it's like, what are we actually seeing? Are we making more out of something by thinking about our own experience, our own fears, or is it actually there? And it's really hard to tell, because even with all the measuring techniques and the spectrograms and just trying to measure the energy levels, it's like, is it really there?
Right. So is it really there, or is it something that's just all in the head kind of thing?
Yeah.
Well, Cassie, you actually brought up a very interesting point with your example of 13 Ghosts, because and we talked about it before we got started, because recently a lot of music promoters have found a way to resurrect the dead. Artists like Michael Jackson or Tupac Shakur, where now they're holding concerts and we're seeing them perform in front of us, and we know it's not them because they've been dead for 20, 30 years, and yet here they are. They're doing the moonwalk. They're singing all the songs that we grew up listening to, but it's not them. And yet there's just something that's just so fascinating about the fact that that we're taking a ghost, a digital ghost, and we're manipulating it in a way to sort of suit our taste. So this does bring me to the next point about modern technology. Have we gotten to the point now where we're able to take the mystery of what it is to be a ghost, the mystery behind ghosts, and sort of reduce it to a formula or in an algorithm where we can control what they do, how they appear, and how they interact with us?
Definitely, you can see that happening in modern films, where you have the popular actress or actor that's passed on, and yet they still need them for that series. Like the whole Carrie Fisher put in there as General Leia, and I was like, for me, when I first saw that, I'm like, that looked kind of creepy. That really freaked me out more than like I accepted that she was present there, because I knew that she wasn't, and that was in itself kind of scary.
Yeah, and I was actually going to bring up that exact same thing. So the example I was going to give was in the same movie, but I was going to bring up Peter Cushing. you know, who was in the original Star Wars, had been dead for, 30 plus years, who they, resurrected, for lack of a better word, into Rogue One. And I know now there's a big lawsuit going on where I guess Peter Cushing's estate is suing Disney for using his likeness in that film. So it's that's right there in the courts going on right now, this, resurrecting these past actors and putting them back on film.
They even have instances like we see like Clint Eastwood, not Clint Eastwood. You see they put them in these commercials and they try to get us to buy these products based on our nostalgia. So.
Or I mean, even to kind of take it even a step further than that is you just even like the whole thing with deep fakes and an AI, how can we even start telling the difference between what's the actual person and what's an AI generated version of that person? So I mean, it's scary in a way.
Yeah, it kind of comes down to what is the intention behind it? Like in these concerts with these musicians and artists, is it to, bring about their talent and their memory to new fans, to remind old fans of how it was in the heyday? Is it being done in an honoring sense, or are we using them to, sell Doritos?
And I'm really torn on it because I was super excited, I won't lie, to see Peter Cushing's face appear in Rogue One, because I obviously, being a horror fan, he's one of those classic horror actors along with Christopher Lee and Vincent Price. So seeing him again, to me, that was comforting. But then the more I thought about it, I realized, well, in a way, I guess it is kind of creepy, and I can understand, sort of the legalities and the, so I'm kind of in the middle with some of these where they're used, maybe for that nostalgia hook. It's, I don't know.
Are we presenting the authentic person, or are we just presenting what our interpretation is, what we want to present? It's a very sticky situation.
It's sort of like what is the authentic portrayal of a ghost? Almost the ghost of this, let's say Peter Cushing, for instance. Would he, would the ghost of Peter Cushing still be, on the Death Star, or is he just something that Disney, that the top brass at Disney's decided this is what we want him to do, even if he's not here?
Because that was the other question, was did you need to do all the AI, or could you have just, done some makeup and prosthetics on an actor to get a close representation and just, or something like that,
Like that's what they would in The Crow when Brandon Lee died. They basically just finished off the scenes with a stunt double and darkened it up and put more makeup on him. But I think for an iconic character like that, it would be really hard, and I think people would be like, "Well, how come we can't see him?" So, but at the same time, was he necessary to be there? That's all.
Well, I was going to say, with something like that, if you have a different actor portraying the character, it's not as terrifying, because we still know that that's a person, as it were. Even if it's not the same actor, it's still a person. Whereas with holograms and AI generated, figures, there's something that's a bit more creepy about it, because of the fact that we know it's not really a person. It may look like some human being. It may talk and walk and have the same facial expressions, but we know it's not really them. You know what I mean? So that's why I sort of see that there's, I guess you could say it's sort of like the next step in the evolution of the ghost story. It's now taking the ghost from being something that's otherworldly, that's ethereal, that's supernatural, and kind of making them into something that we can manipulate, at will. I mean, do you think there we'll still gravitate towards ghost stories, like the traditional ghost stories with, disembodied spirits, or is this, becoming the new norm where we're normalizing ghosts in ones and zeros?
I don't know, I think ghost stories are still very popular. I mean, people go on them, and people like to hear the scary stories about what happened behind it and where everybody is. I mean, they're still going to be part of our narrative, whether if there's stolen images or going back to the whole gothic idea of this is lost loved ones coming back to revisit us. I think that they're just always going to be here.
Yeah, I think it's also like there's something about the tangible ghosts, hearing books getting knocked off of a shelf or doors slamming versus the, sort of the uncanny valley of seeing the AI. It's like you're almost willing to suspend disbelief more for the bumps in the night than the AI. At least, I think the AI for me it doesn't have as much it's like it disconnects from the humanity of the ghost, I think. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does, because because with the ghost, that there's still the human element, even if it's not, not encased in flesh and blood, like we are. It was a person, it still is a person. Whereas with AI, you sometimes have to wonder, has it ever walked the earth in human form?
Mm-hmm.
I think AI is, for me, AI does not seem to be. It's like a false reality. It was like, okay, this is potentially what it could be, but it's really just a copy of a copy. And so, even though we can reproduce it to make money off of it, but is it going to replace everything? I don't think that's going to be the case.
Chris, I wasn't sure if you were about to say something.
Oh, I can. Yeah, kind of. I feel like AI can be a useful tool, but I feel like it needs to stay a tool and not the way, and not the way. Because I feel like there's always going to be shortcomings because, as Matthew mentioned, the kind of the copy of a copy. I've tried, sometimes in writing, I've tried to use it to get like a idea, but it's so it's good to maybe get the creative juices flowing, but I would never want to depend on it to replace just good old creativity.
So as creatives, as guys, as individuals who work in the creative industry, how have you utilized ghosts in your in your narrative, whether it's putting it on page or on stage or whatever? How have you guys utilized that?
Well, I guess I'll just jump in because it's obvious, the most obvious. I run a horror theater company, and one of the things I instilled from year one is, because I know this is October and we're talking about ghost stories leading up to Halloween, but traditionally December is ghost story month. And it's that long tradition of telling ghost stories at Christmas. So, one of the things when I founded this company was I wanted to do a ghost story every Christmas to give some alternative holiday programming to, the stuff you always, that you see. And not that, obviously one of the pillars of holiday theater is a ghost story with a Christmas Carol. But Dickens also wrote some scary ones. So this will be our third year coming up of doing a ghost story at Christmas. The first year I adapted 4 ghost stories. We adapted Dickens' The Signal Man, which to me is his best ghost story. And then 3 others from the Victorian era. This past year, we did a stage version of The Turn of the Screw, a stage version of the play The Innocents, which was later made into the film version, which if you're looking at ghost stories on film, it's one of the best ghost movies of all time, The Innocents. And then this year we're doing a modern ghost story called The Thin Place, which is about it's a kind of this fragile woman who her mother has kind of mysteriously disappeared. And so she seeks out help from a medium, hoping to maybe communicate with the other side to see if her mother is there, or maybe to speak with her grandmother, who kind of had a similar gift when she was alive. And it's kind of builds to an interesting climax. But it's neat because it's a modern play, but it's got that one foot in the Victorian era with the medium and with the spiritualist, elements of the story. So yeah, it is definitely a main core of what I do creatively is the ghost story.
For me, I don't like writing the traditional ghost story or anything. I will blend them in. Like in my play, is Lazarus Rising. It's about zombies, but there's a character in there who had lost his dad. He keeps seeing his dad and will actually continue playing baseball throughout, pretending to hit the ball far and say, look at this, see how far I went. And when the character's actually dying, he actually sees his dad and calls out for his dad for that moment there. So I find that taking the ghost out of the traditional elements there and blending it in with other elements, it's very fascinating.
We just recently at Matthew's Playhouse closed our season opener, which was an original play called 1 Year to Die, which was a heavier dramatic offering than our local family community theater offers. But the story was about 1944, World War II, Louisiana. A black mother and a white mother get news that their sons who are in the Navy, their ship has been torpedoed down. And a Navy officer comes to them both and tells them that the boys will be listed as missing in action for 1 year. And at the end of that year, they'll be legally declared dead. And it's about the women and how they process their grief in that time period. And the director and the playwright added another element into the play where we cast 2 young boys to sort of act as the memory or the ghosts of the sailors as the mothers remembered them. They were non-speaking roles. They came out periodically and just sort of were in the background, setting tables, whittling, tossing a baseball, sort of things that they would have done in their life with their mothers. And they couldn't, it wasn't in the play that the characters could see them. It was more as an effect for the audience to get an idea of how these mothers remember their boys, even though they're grown, they're sailors, they're, fighting this war. To them, their imprint is always them as children. And so it was a small moments in the show, but I think it was really impactful to kind of add that sweetness back into it and that everyday life. So yeah, I think there are other ways you can incorporate ghosts without it being, really in your face, blood, gore, jump scare, kind of that, the bittersweetness of life aspects of it.
I mean, that's really interesting too, because because when we think of ghosts, we usually think of ghosts as as being the echoes of who this person was at the moment of death. But in this case, it's sort of kind of got this reverse Benjamin Button kind of vibe to it, where it's like we know they're ghosts, but it's not the ghost of the person that we know. It's the ghost of the person of who they were previously before they became the people that they were. Yeah. I mean, that's another thing too, because because when we think of ghosts, we to your point, Matt. I mean, we're married to the idea of the traditional ghost story. We have this idea in mind of you go to like a place that's a very old, a place that has a reputation for being haunted, and bam! I mean, just like Groundhog's Day, you're going to see a ghost, but. But what I really like is the fact that artists they take their understanding of ghosts and the traditional ghost narrative, and you guys kind of turn it on your head. I think with what Charles did with 1 Year to Die was was brilliant, because it wasn't necessarily it's not necessarily a horror play or anything like that, but just having that echo, that ghostly element to it, it kind of makes it a lot more haunting. It's more thought provoking, So in terms of ghost stories, I know I know we go on and talk about how how we like, for instance, the way that Beetlejuice portrays ghosts in the afterlife, or how 13 Ghosts kind of blends science and the supernatural together. Do you guys have any personal experiences or personal encounters with phantasms and spirits?
Mm-hmm. Yep, grew up in a haunted house. When we moved in, it was my stepfather. His father had died in that house, and yep. So basically, there'd be little things like there'd be cigar smoke when nobody's smoking in the house, or like bells ringing. And then one time there was a photo that was on the wall that was placed neatly, gently down on a chair the next day. Like it couldn't have fallen that way if it, by the physics and weight, it would have fallen face forward instead of actually, kind of gently placed down.
Yeah, I went to New Orleans for Halloween a couple of years ago and did a seance down there. Granted, it was with a tour company, so you've got to, put that caveat that they, if you don't see a ghost at the end of this, money back guaranteed kind of thing. But the tour guide was a friend of a friend who was also a voodoo practitioner. And we went to the upper room of a restaurant in New Orleans, and we did the whole thing with the dowsing rods and asking yes/no questions and trying to see, what information we could, glean. And then there was a seance part where we all stood in a circle, and the lights went down, and the guide was, doing whatever invocations or speeches to try, and it was a completely still night. There was a wind chime outside that, as he started doing that, started waving in a way that no other branches were moving. We couldn't see curtains rippling or anything, and so it was very focused on this wind chime. And as we're continuing, there was an altar in the corner, I think, to Marie Laveau, and there was a figurine. Nobody was near that altar. We were away. As we're continuing through this, there was a figurine that flew off of the altar and broke. And at that point, the guide was like, "We're done. We're stopping. Everybody take this cascarilla stuff," which is like a ground up eggshells that they use in a lot of the practices. And he was like, making crosses on our forehead and, sending us, blowing the dust out and everything. Now, whether that was just part of his good show, I don't know. But it felt very real in the moment, and he played it off as if he was freaked out as well. So, definitely got goosebumps at the time.
Oh gosh, let me think about this. Obviously, I grew up in a theater that has plenty of ghost stories that surround it. So I remember some of my very first shows sitting around and having kind of the old guard, the original guard who was there since the founding of the theater, telling all of the ghost stories from the year, from over the years, which is always really fascinating. I've done a lot of kind of dark ghost tourism. Done the ghost tours all over the country. And I guess I've done a couple in Europe as well. It's interesting because I haven't had a whole lot of experience on them, but my wife has had experiences on them. She had one in Charleston and even got a picture that the tour guide was very impressed with. And then we were in Savannah, and she had a really strong reaction to one of the homes we were in that was purportedly haunted, which is very interesting because I never thought, we never were thought of him being sensitive to that sort of thing or anything, but that was interesting. Then in my own house here, there was a family that lived here before us. We've kind of suspected that maybe that, there may have been a death in the house beforehand. We don't know that for sure. But, years ago, a friend of mine had bought me this little, and I may have told the story in here before, so I apologize if I have, Luke. This little like Edgar Allan Poe little mini book for the Raven. And, and if you could come by and you'd wave your hand in front of it, and then this disembodied voice would say, "Nevermore." And it got really annoying. So I think we took the batteries out, left it. But then it's like, in the room that we feel like may have been the room which is now my horror memorabilia room, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know. It's 3 a.m. I'm out watching TV, and then I just start hearing "Nevermore" coming from that room with no one in there to set off the sensor. So I don't know that. Yeah. Who knows what that is? But that was, that's probably the closest around here to me having a genuine paranormal experience.
And the batteries were taken out too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Ooh. Well, I do want to ask you guys this question as well, because Cassie, you told me a pretty interesting thing. When we had our last chat, you said that traditionally, theaters have a ghost or a resident ghost. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so kind of ghosts in general kind of go hand in hand with theater. There's a big tradition with putting out an object called the ghost light at the end of the night. Now, depending on which lore you subscribe to, the practical version of it is so, when the theater is dark, you don't, trip and fall into an open orchestra pit or bang into a set piece. The sort of the more romantic lore is for the ghosts of the theater to have light to play by at night when everyone else is gone. I have had 2 other sort of unexplained phenomenon that I like to chalk it up to ghosts, but both of those have also been in a theater. So I don't know if it's, again, one of those theaters are a place of energy and human gathering and intense emotions on all sides of the spectrum. And so it's where people like to hang out, ghosts like to hang out. Again, theaters are oftentimes historic buildings that were used as hospitals or jails or post office or all these other things. And, energy is carrying over. In a similar vein to the batteries out, I had one instance where we were in rehearsal for a show, and there were, it was me, the director, multiple people, and the scene shop in this particular theater is attached to the back. And we kept hearing an air compressor go off. And I was like, who's building set pieces in the middle of rehearsal? And so I walked back there, and as soon as I crossed over into the scene shop, the air compressor stopped. And I found the air compressor wasn't plugged in. So no idea how it was still generating. I've had moments being the last one out of a theater where, you hear doors opening and closing that you swear you locked, and, creaks and, pops in the floorboards that you're like, there shouldn't be anybody out here. But yeah, I don't know what it is about, what else it is about theaters.
Because Matthew's Playhouse is relative. Well, I would say it's relatively new compared to all the other older theaters in the area.
Yeah, so the Playhouse is we're in our 29th season, but the building that we operate out of is the Matthews Community Center, which used to be a schoolhouse and dates back to the 1900s, 1912. And the original part of the schoolhouse is all still standing. The theater auditorium area was added, I think, in the 2000s. But we've also had our share of ghosts. Before I worked there were paranormal investigators who came through and said that it was a little girl named Jerry, who's a schoolgirl, and she likes to cause trouble. And we do have instances where, we'll have lights come on and off that, shouldn't. There's nobody at the board. We've had extension cords drop down from the catwalk with nobody up there. We've heard footsteps running up and down by the dressing rooms. And, you know, we're just like, oh, it's just Jerry. Hi, Jerry. You know, she just wants some attention too. Chris, the old courthouse has a pretty gnarly theater ghost, don't they?
Yeah, so OCT is the former First Baptist Church in Concord. So its building is now, I think it just turned 100 years old. The building, and the theater is in the original building, and it looks every one of its 100 years old, which is great for me because it's the audience can already come in and there's already some spooky factor already. But yeah, the ghost there is called the Deacon because it was a former church. And yeah, lots of just crazy stuff over the years, with people that are working late at night, looking up into like the balcony and seeing a silhouetted figure in front of one of the stained glass windows, to just mishaps and things going on, noises, cold spots. I mean, you name it. There's been a little bit of everything. Back when I first started doing shows there in the early 90s, there was a rash of of people probably needed a ghost light during the show, unfortunately, but people falling off the stage during productions, which was really interesting, and so they felt like something had to do with the ghost, maybe didn't like that particular season. And for a while they would give out, then every year at the awards, they would give out Deacon Awards, which are these little like toilet paper ghosts on a stick that would be like given out for like the yearly mishaps and things that happened that they chalked up to the ghost in the building. For me, I mean, it always is, it does feel weird when you're in there by yourself. There's some times I've been in there and you feel like you hear people walking on the floorboards above you, because it's an old creaky building where you feel like you hear sinks come on or things like that in places where no one should be. But I think part of it is just the creepiness of the building itself. And I mentioned that we do our shows down in the basement of this creepy building at the Black Box. So.
Well, Matthew, what about you? Because have you ever been in any theaters that that have had any ghosts running around causing mishaps?
Basically where we work, because we have a theater company here too. I really haven't had any of those experiences there with any ghosts. But where my wife, she's a theater teacher, she does have a ghost she talks about, which, kind of a mythos there that she always brings up with the kids. So, but other than that, I really haven't had any extensive ones, except for, the whole ghost lights are on and just keeping those traditions going. And you got to make sure not to say a certain play.
Yes.
I think we all know. I think we all know which one you're talking about.
We don't want to bring any bad luck here, so yeah.
Well, that's actually a pretty good point. I mean, are there like any certain plays or any certain stories that you kind of feel like maybe I don't want to jinx it? I don't want to, I don't want any of the lights, falling on stage prematurely.
Yeah, there's one of the other superstitions in theater is that it's bad luck to put peacock feathers or the peacock pattern on stage.
Really?
It's something to do with like the evil eye. And we were doing a production of Clue, and our actress who played Mrs. Peacock had a peacock feather in her hat. And like the second day of opening, she like stepped backwards, ended up twisting her ankle and had to do the rest of the show in a boot. So I don't know if it's, comes with the territory of that show. But yeah, there's some things that you just shouldn't do.
Okay, I did not know about the peacock feathers.
I was like, am I making that up, Chris? Matthew, you got that? Okay.
Yeah.
It makes sense with the evil eye, definitely, Yeah, because I know that every production of the Scottish play that I've heard of going in there's always been some sort of mishap. Like one time when my wife directed it, a blade piece went flying off and it landed in one of the audience's members. Luckily, it was a board member. The last one, my wife fell while skating and shattered her wrist as she was directing it. Well, not directing on skates, but she was doing skating too. And I'm like, oh, well, that's why you shouldn't be doing this play.
Yeah.
And there's also, if you do say it, there's it seems like each theater company has a different way to counteract the curse. You have to spin around 3 times and go spit outside while saying your favorite cuss word, whatever it may be, to kind of eliminate the bad juju from saying that particular show.
Yeah, I used to when I taught high school theater, I made them run around the theater 3 times. At least I knew they would get their cardio in as well.
Bounce it while you're doing it. Yeah.
So we're getting near the end of the panel discussion. And I just want to thank you guys for taking the time to be on here. I really had a lot of fun, and I'm really learning a lot, because I genuinely did not know about the peacock feathers. I thought it was just one of those things where it's like, it's whatever. But wow, now I know I'm not gonna have to order any peacock feathers, going forward. But but since it's October, and since we're talking about ghosts, it takes me back to when I was in middle school, and we were getting ready to go on our field trip to Williamsburg, and we were talking about ghosts one day, and we were just chatting amongst ourselves, and we were like, well, if we were ghosts, like, what would we do? So I like to open that question out to all of you guys. If you were a ghost, what would you do, and how would you like to be portrayed in the media, either on stage or in print or on film?
I'm definitely an vengeful ghost. I'm going to go around and harass everybody and make sure everybody knows that, I'm there. And if I don't like something, that's it. It's gone. It's smashed.
Yeah. I think I would be more of a mundane ghost. If I had the ability to get through my to be read list on my bookshelf, if I could somehow incorporate that into the afterlife, I think I'd be golden. But yeah, I think, and I'm a little mischievous too. You gotta get your kick somewhere in the afterlife. You gotta play some tricks, nothing too harmful.
Yeah, I think for me, it's going to come down to what those ghost rules are that you're living, because I will say, if I'm stuck in my house for all eternity, it's probably going to influence what type of ghost I'm going to be. But probably definitely more of a, maybe not so much vengeful, but maybe more playful. I definitely want to screw with people who are living in this house, maybe not an evil get out way, but just, make their lives a little bit challenging kind of a way.
Just make everything 60 inches.
Yeah.
Okay.
I used to think it'd be great if I could think, before I died, if I could write some note that they would find that could that I could create this ghost story for me. So people would make pilgrimage to my grave. Say, oh, this is the grave of this ghost. But, I have to think about the best way to do that.
It's the long con. You got to plant those.
It is. I got to start now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Found a note like that in our house that we just bought. It was kind of creepy.
What did you find?
It was on the note. It said something like, please protect his house from evil. And it was sitting there in one of the cabins we opened up. I'm like, okay. What did we buy?
Instructions? How so?
I'm like, okay. And yeah. So hopefully it worked.
Just out of curiosity, none of you guys have like a miniature of a town that you keep on the attic, do you?
Maybe not.
Not yet.
I'm just asking here because I know sometimes people will do that, and then weird things happen, like you go off a bridge and then you don't and then
when the sandworms come. So
yeah, and then you go home and you suddenly find this book and you're like, oh, I don't remember that book being
but I mean, yeah, building one of those in my attic means that Catherine O'Hara is going to come to my house and I'll do it.
But guys, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy days to be on this panel. I really enjoyed it, and I really do want to have you guys come back on for many more episodes, because we have a lot in the works. And I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to watch this episode. Let me know down in the comments below, what would you do if you were a ghost? Me personally, because I have no shame now that I'm no longer in human form, I'd probably walk around naked. And there's nothing anybody can do about it, because I'm a ghost. But thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.